Growing up watching your favorite player just dominate the game gave you a feeling like no other.
And Roethlisberger surveys, pump fakes, rolls out, throws, back of the end zone, touchdown.
Then you get a little bit older and you realize that your favorite NFL player probably isn't a very good person.
Of Ezekiel Elliott pulling down a woman's shirt at a St. Patrick's Day party on Saturday in Dallas.
Ben Roethlisberger is being accused of sexual assault.
One of its brightest stars has been charged with child abuse.
Brett Favre won 3 straight MVPs and threw more touchdowns than anyone in the NFL by the time he retired. Big Ben won 2 Super Bowls. O.J. Simpson ran for over 2,000 yards in a single season in just 14 games, becoming a cultural icon. Tyreek Hill, Adrian Peterson, possibly the best players at their position of their generation. Lawrence Taylor is arguably the greatest player of all time.
Diane O'Connor beats one man, beats another, and down he goes. There's something about Lawrence Taylor that is larger than life.
And yet all of them, unfortunately, kinda suck. Brett Favre was the greatest gunslinger the NFL has ever seen, winning 3 straight MVPs, a Super Bowl, and starting 297 games in a row, playing through injuries most guys wouldn't even be able to stand up from. When he retired, Favre held every major passing record: touchdowns, yards, completions, and wins. He was chaos and glorious all at once, throwing a 50-yard laser between 3 defenders on one drive and then tossing a heartbreaking interception off his back foot the next.
Why do you even ponder passing? I mean, you can take a knee and try a 56-yard field goal. This is not Detroit, man. This is the Super Bowl.
Ask any coach or fan, they'd still want him under center with the game on the line because Brett was that guy. But years after he stepped away from the game, he stole headlines for all the wrong reasons. He became a central figure in a massive Mississippi welfare fraud scandal.
New details now surrounding accusations that retired NFL quarterback Brett Favre used welfare funds to help build the new volleyball stadium,
the largest in the state's history. He was accused of helping direct millions of dollars that were meant for poor families towards building a volleyball facility at his alma mater, Southern Miss, where his daughter actually played. State auditors claim that $5 million of funds went towards building that arena, and the scheme took place between 2016 and 2019, when at least $77 million from a program helping poor families was misused. Favre also received $1.1 million for speaking events where he actually maybe never even showed up, and he paid it back eventually, but the money was gone and the families who needed it never saw a dime. Text messages between Favre and one nonprofit director actually emerged during the case, showing that Favre asked the director if he could be paid in a way that the media wouldn't be able to find out about. Favre denied any knowledge of where the funds were coming from, and he was never arrested or charged with a crime, but the optics were brutal. A guy who threw for more touchdowns than anyone in history ended up accused of stealing money from the poorest people in Mississippi. Brett was one of the most thrilling players who ever lived, but off the field, his legacy hasn't exactly aged like fine wine. And he's unfortunately one of the least disturbing entries on this entire list. The next one gets even harder to defend. The Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Big Ben 11th overall in 2004, who was actually there to save the franchise since they just lost Cordero Stewart in free agency. The plan was for him to sit and learn behind Tommy Maddox, but fate made sure that didn't last long. Tommy went down with an injury, and by the end of his rookie season, Ben was the starter. And by the end of his second season, he'd won his first Super Bowl beating Seattle. He followed that up with another championship run in 2008, beating Arizona in one of the most dominant performances a quarterback has ever had in a Super Bowl, throwing a beautiful dime to Santonio Holmes for the game winner. Over the course of his career, Big Ben threw for over 64,000 yards and 418 touchdowns, making 6 Pro Bowls and becoming the face of one of the most storied franchises in the NFL. When you talk about Steelers football, Roethlisberger is in the conversation with Bradshaw and the rest of them. The guy who brought the team into the modern era and kept them relevant for nearly 2 decades. But there's another side to this story, and it's uglier than anything you'll see on a highlight reel. Multiple women accused Roethlisberger of assault across his career. In one case, a civil lawsuit was filed in Georgia, and it was settled for an undisclosed amount. In another incident, a woman accused him of assault at a lake in Nevada. The details are pretty disturbing.
We're learning today that the 2-time Super Bowl winner Ben Roethlisberger is being accused of sexual assault. The Pittsburgh Steelers served with a civil lawsuit by a woman who claims he forced her to have sex with him last year somewhere in the state of Nevada.
The NFL eventually suspended him for 6 games in 2010 under the personal conduct policy, but an arbitrator reduced that to 4 games and he barely missed any real time. He fought the league, but he lost, and the punishment was so slight that it barely even registered. The thing that stands out the most is how little consequence he faced relative to what he was accused of. He had 2 Super Bowl rings in a city that loved him, and when women came forward with allegations, the system moved slowly. Big Ben's arm was real, and so were those allegations, but those still pale in comparison to the largest sports scandal of all time, which is what we have coming up next. O.J. Simpson is one of the most complicated figures in American sports history. He came into the NFL as the 2nd overall pick in 1969 after a Heisman Trophy winning career at USC. Big, fast, and powerful in a way nobody had seen before at the running back position. In 1973, he became the first player ever to rush for over 2,000 yards in a single season, finishing with 2,003. And that record stood for decades. He made 6 Pro Bowls, was a first-team All-Pro 4 times, and he's in the Hall of Fame. On the field, OJ was a monster, running with the kind of power and speed combination that made defenses look silly. He was the Juice, a nickname that captured exactly what he was, electric and unstoppable, and a cultural icon all at once. People loved him for what he did between the white lines, and it wasn't hard to tell why. And then the fall came. In 1994, OJ's ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found dead. After an impromptu Broncos chase, which happened during an NBA Finals game wildly, OJ was then arrested and charged with their murders. What followed was one of the most publicized criminal trials in American history. The country was glued to their televisions for months, and the verdict divided the country along racial lines in ways that are still felt today. OJ was acquitted in the criminal case, but he was later found liable in a civil suit in order to pay $33.5 million to families of the victim. He lived in obscurity for years after that, and then in 2008, he was convicted of robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas, serving 9 years in prison before being released. OJ died in April of 2024. His football legacy is massive and complex. He's in the Hall of Fame, a lot of his records still stand, and there are entire generations of fans who remember the Juice and the way he wanted to be remembered. But the trial, the acquittal, the civil case, the robbery conviction, and the prison time are all a part of his story now. It's hard to separate the football from the man. But before we get into another running back, if you all enjoy this content, I'd appreciate it if you all subscribed. It lets YouTube and myself know that you want more videos like this. Now let's get back into it. And with that said, we have a quick word from our sponsor, Courtyard. So I did a thing. I bought JSN's 2023 Panini Donruss Optic card. Right now, his cards are some of the hardest to find at a fair price because he just went off last season. Scalpers have sealed products on lock, so honestly, pulling a card is sometimes easier than buying one at MSRP. Which, if you think about it, is honestly crazy. Luckily, Courtyard's a marketplace where you can rip packs online and trade instantly worldwide without ever having to pack or ship anything, if that's your thing. And instead of collecting dust in your closet, your cards live in their insured, temperature-controlled vault, completely free. Everyone backed by their authenticity guarantee. No expertise needed and no risk of getting scammed. That's why I've been building my collection through Courtyard. Slabbed, graded, vaulted, all one click from your doorstep. There's 0 buyer fee and 0 seller fees as well. And another great thing is if a pull's not for you, you can sell it back to them instantly with their guaranteed buyback offer. Courtyard's pioneering the next generation of commerce through gamified shopping. You can find them with the link in the description. Use code NFL Stories 15 for 15% off at checkout. That's NFL Stories 15 for 15% off. Thank you again to Courtyard for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to JSN. Ezekiel Elliott was supposed to be the future of Dallas Cowboys football. They made him the 4th overall pick in 2016, and he immediately justified that selection with the 1,600-yard All-Pro first team rookie season, following that up with 2 more 1,000-yard seasons in the next 3 years while making the Pro Bowl again. The Cowboys gave him the ball constantly, and he delivered. In 2018, he was a second-team All-Pro. The guy was running angry, and defenses really had no answer for him. Zeke was the centerpiece of the Cowboys offense for years, delivering the kind of production that made him one of the most valuable players in the league. He was tough and physical, giving the fans in Dallas something to rally around. For a team that hadn't won a Super Bowl since the 1990s, Elliott represented hope. Then the video surfaced. It showed Elliott pulling down a girl's top on St. Patrick's Day.
TMZ released a video yesterday of Ezekiel Elliott pulling down a woman's shirt at a St. Patrick's Day party on Saturday in Dallas.
This wasn't a rumor or an allegation, it was on tape for everyone to see. Then, after a year-long NFL investigation, they found sufficient evidence of domestic violence against his former girlfriend at Ohio State. He was suspended 6 games in 2017 under the personal conduct policy. He fought the suspension, he lost.
The NFL has suspended Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games after an investigation into alleged domestic violence.
And he barely missed any real time anyway because the appeal process took so long that he was back on the field before anyone expected him to be. The part that makes this story even weirder is that he was never actually charged with the crime. The NFL punished him, but 6 games in the NFL is nothing when you're running back in your prime. He still got paid, he kept playing, and the video along with the case became just another thing that happened rather than something that changed his life drastically. Adrian Peterson came into the NFL as the 7th overall pick in 2007, and he immediately became one of the most feared running backs in the league. In his second season, he rushed for 1,760 yards, making first-team All-Pro and coming second in MVP voting. Then in 2012, he did something that nobody thought was possible anymore, running for 2,097 yards and falling just short of Eric Dickerson's single-season record. He won the MVP that year and was the unquestioned best player in football. All Day was his nickname, and it fit perfectly. He ran with the violence that made defenses fear him every single week. Peterson was a superstar, the kind of player that other coaches had to build their entire game plan around, because if you couldn't stop him, then you had no shot of winning. He made the Pro Bowl every year except for when he tore his ACL and was a first-team All-Pro 3 times in his first 6 seasons. There was a stretch where he was averaging well over 100 yards per game. It felt like he could run through a wall if he wanted to. Then came the child abuse case. Peterson was indicted for reckless injury to a 4-year-old with a switch.
Another scandal for the National Football League breaking overnight. One of its brightest stars has been charged with child abuse. The bombshell comes as the league's commissioner is on the hot seat in the explosive Ray Rice domestic violence case.
There are now reports that Adrian Peterson had done corporal punishment on another one of his 4-year-old sons, and he caused an injury as a result of that.
Photos from that incident showed the child covered in welts and blood. The prosecutor said he used a belt. The images that came out that case were disturbing to look at, and they raised serious questions about what Peterson was doing to discipline his child. He eventually reached a plea deal, missing most of the 2014 season as a result, but he came back and kept playing at a high level for years after that. The thing that makes this so frustrating is that Peterson was an MVP just a few years before the indictment. Same kind of violence that made him great on the field was apparently part of how he lived his life off of it. He never really faced the kind of backlash that would have ended most people's careers, and he kept playing into his late 30s across multiple teams. Adrian Peterson was one of the greatest running backs who ever lived, but beating a 4-year-old with a switch and then saying he switched to a belt a few years later is kinda tough to look past. Tyreek Hill went from being a 5th round overall pick to being one of the fastest NFL players of all time, running a 4.29 40 at his pro day and translating that onto the NFL field immediately. In 2022 and 2023, he had back-to-back 1,700-yard receiving seasons, made the Pro Bowl 8 times across his career, 5 first-team All-Pros, and won his Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. The guy they called the Cheetah was a legitimate superstar. Hill was the kind of player that made defensive coordinators lose sleep. His speed was otherworldly, and he turned short passes into long touchdowns almost every single week. If you gave him any kind of separation, he was gone. There was no catching him. He made the impossible look routine, giving the Chiefs a matchup nightmare that nobody in the league could match. But something almost stopped him from even entering the league. Tyreek was drafted by the Chiefs after a domestic violence incident at a college was ruled unfounded.
Back in 2014, Hill was a college football player at Oklahoma State. He was arrested for beating his pregnant girlfriend. Hill hit her in the face, choked her, and punched her in the stomach. He also put her in a headlock.
He got a second chance and built a Hall of Fame career with it. But then the audio recording surfaced. It was a conversation between Hill and his then fiance, and in it, he was discussing discipline methods for their son. The things he said in that recording were deeply disturbing. There was a child welfare investigation opened as a result. Tyreek avoided criminal charges, but the recording was out there for everyone to hear. The language he used, the things he described, none of it sounded like normal parenting. Since then, there's been even more assault charges with different women. He's not playing right now after the devastating knee injury, but once he's signed, he's still one of the most dangerous players in the entire league. And still a guy whose off-field behavior couldn't make you think twice about celebrating him. Warren Sapp was the 12th overall pick in 1995, becoming one of the most dominant defensive tackles of his era. He anchored the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that won the Super Bowl in 2003, was the 1999 Defensive Player of the Year, made 7 Pro Bowls across his career, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2013. The guy was a force inside. Defenses had to account for him on every single play, and he made life miserable for opposing quarterbacks. Sapp was one of those players who made the Bucs relevant when they had no business being relevant. The heart of that defense for years. And when they finally got over the hump and won it all, he was right in the middle of it. The Bucks put a statue of him outside the stadium. That tells you everything you need to know about how the organization viewed him. But the statue doesn't tell the whole story. Warren was investigated for assault at a senior living facility in Arizona. Separately, he was charged with solicitation for trying to hire an undercover cop as a prostitute. The solicitation charge was eventually dismissed, but the assault charge, that lingered. The man was a Hall of Famer, and he was accused of putting his hands on people at a nursing home. That's not something that should be buried under a Super Bowl ring and a bus in Canton. Sapp had also spoken publicly about being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, crediting therapy and medication with stabilizing his life. That's important context, and it does make more sense. But it also doesn't erase what he's been accused of doing. Warren Sapp was one of the best defensive tackles of the generation, but the assault allegations and the solicitation charge are part of his story now. And they're not things that just go away because you got a statue. Antonio Brown wasn't a first-round pick. He was a sixth-round pick in 2010, and he spent most of his rookie season behind Hines Ward and Mike Wallace returning kicks. By 2011, he'd forced his way into the lineup and made his first Pro Bowl. The Steelers chose him over Wallace, signing him to a 5-year, $42 million deal in 2012. From 2013 to 2018, he was arguably the best receiver in football. He led the league in receptions twice and receiving yards twice, made 4 first-team All-Pro squads from 2014 to 2017, and posted a career-high 15 touchdown catches in 2018. Over 12 seasons, he finished with 928 catches, 12,291 yards, 83 touchdowns, and 7 Pro Bowls. He also won a Super Bowl with Tampa in 2020, catching a touchdown from Tom Brady in the win. The unraveling built over time. His former trainer, Brittany Taylor, sued him for sexual assault across incidents in 2017 and 2018, a case that settled in 2021.
He should be ashamed of himself.
He's a team destroyer.
He is the kind of player I would never, ever want to play for.
Allegations overnight against NFL star Antonio Brown, accused of sexually assaulting a woman who worked as his trainer.
Tonight, Tampa police say they're trying to arrest former NFL player Antonio Brown.
Other allegations followed, including from a mural painter and a truck driver who later won a $1.2 million judgment against them. The NFL suspended him for the first 8 games of 2020 over personal conduct violations tied to a no-contest plea on a burglary and battery charges. On-field breakdowns piled up alongside the legal trouble, throwing a football at Ben Roethlisberger and skipping practice before a must-win game in 2018, showing up to the Raiders camp with frostbitten feet, threatening to punch the Raiders GM and calling him a cracker, which is objectively, honestly, hilarious. But, you know, that can't happen. And my personal favorite, him stripping off his gear and walking out of the stadium during the Jets-Bucks game in 2022, effectively ending his career. By 2024, he'd filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with $3 million in debt, despite earning over $80 million in NFL contracts. Then came the most serious charge yet. Brown was accused of firing 2 shots at a man after a fight following a May 2025 celebrity boxing event in Miami, grazing the victim's neck. He fled to Dubai rather than face it, and he was arrested by U.S. Marshals and flown to New Jersey to await extradition on a second-degree attempted charge carrying up to 15 years in prison. Just a crazy fall from grace so fast. Jim Brown came into the league in 1957 as a second overall pick, and he immediately changed what the NFL actually thought a running back could be. And you might be thinking, Jim Brown? And I was just as surprised as you were when I was researching for this. Old heads were holding on to this info on lock and key. He was 215 pounds of pure power, speed, and instincts, winning MVP in his rookie season. In his second season, he rushed for 1,527 yards, winning MVP again, and he just got better from there, finishing his career with 9 Pro Bowls, 8 first-team All-Pros, and 126 career touchdowns. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1972, and most people who have studied the game consider him the greatest running back who ever lived. On the field, there was never been anybody like him. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry over his career, which was an NFL record, never missed a game in 9 seasons, and was a complete football player who could run, catch, and block with equal dominance. The tape doesn't lie. Jim was one of the greatest of all time. But that tape is only part of the story. Jim Brown was arrested for assault against ex-girlfriends on multiple occasions across his career. It was like half a dozen times.
There's a strong push from 2 Syracuse University alumni to try to remove a statue that stands outside the Athletic Center campus.
With a past of domestic violence dating back to 1965. It's the reason 2 SU alums are pushing to get the statue of Jim Brown taken down.
No one denied Jim Brown's history of sexual and domestic violence. Everyone seemed to know about it and then not doing anything about it.
One incident involved an 18-year-old he allegedly beat so badly she needed hospital treatment. The pattern was consistent, and it didn't stop after he retired from football. He intimidated accusers and witnesses over the years, and he managed to avoid serious legal consequences for most of his life. There's no bipolar diagnosis here, there's no explanation for why this happened other than the fact it seemed like Jim Brown liked beating women. He was the greatest running back in NFL history, and he also was a man who had documented history of domestic violence that lasted decades. Darren Sharper was drafted in the second round in 1997, and he spent 14 seasons across 3 different teams. He won a Super Bowl with the Packers, was a 2-time first-team All-Pro, and finished his career with 63 interceptions. He was a playmaker at safety, the kind of player who could change a game with one pick. Teams trusted him, coaches trusted him, and fans loved him for making the impossible happen on defense. On the field, Sharper was exactly what you wanted in a safety, smart and physical with the nose for the ball. But the field isn't where the story ends. After retirement, an investigation revealed that Sharper had drugged multiple women across several states. 24 women came forward with allegations spanning years of his career. The victim accounts described being incapacitated and then assaulted while unconscious. He was drugging women and sexually assaulting them while they weren't able to defend themselves. That's what the investigation showed, and that's what he pleaded guilty to.
You do solemnly state the testimony you're about to give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Darren Sharper.
Thank you.
Sharper, please be seated.
Sharper was sentenced to 20 years in prison for drug and sexual assault charges. The NFL suspended him indefinitely and then rescinded his pension after the conviction. He was probably going to make the Hall of Fame, a player who's supposed to protect people, and he was using his position to hurt people who trusted him. And we're saving the most heartbreaking one for me as the last entry. This one just hits different. Lawrence Taylor came into the NFL as the 2nd overall pick in 1981. He was the 1986 MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. Won 2 Super Bowls with the New York Giants and finished his career with 142 sacks, which was the NFL record at that time. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1999, and he's widely considered the greatest defensive player in NFL history. LT changed the game. Before him, pass rushing was a secondary consideration. After him, it became the primary focus of every defense in the league. He also made every team have to get a really good left tackle. The guy was a terror for over a decade, scaring quarterbacks, disrupting entire game plans, and making the Giants a respected organization, while being one of the most dominant players who ever lived.
Son, I gotta do better than this. Let's go, here we come. Going back to California, guys.
There's another side to Lawrence Taylor, and it's the darkest part of this entire list. He pleaded guilty to charges with underage girls. He admitted to engaging in acts with a 16-year-old and potentially others. He was required to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. The NFL initially suspended him from all Hall of Fame ceremony. He was one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history, and he's now a registered offender. The tape doesn't lie on the field, but what happened off the field ended any argument that his football legacy should be celebrated without any question. These guys gave us moments we'll never forget. They also gave us reasons to look closer at the legends we built up. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.